Hi, I'm Mark Murphy, CEO of Leadership IQ. And for the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about middle performers. Sometimes we call them B players. They're fundamentally the bulk of our workforce, folks that have more potential than they're presently using. Now, if you think about this, it's been sort of cliched throughout the years to think about our workforce as falling into three simple camps. Now, it's a little more complicated than this, but let's just start with the simple. That we have about 20-ish% fall into the high performer territory, 100%ers we would call them. We have about 70% fall into the middle performer territory, and then we have about 10% or so fall into that low performer. And there are varieties of low performers, which we'll talk about in another segment. But for the middle performers, too often, folks have operated under the assumption that somehow these folks are just tapped out, they're maxed out, that they are giving it their all, and still they're never going to achieve that high potential, that high performance kind of level. What we've found in studying thousands upon thousands of middle performers is that only about 10% of middle performers are actually maxed out talent-wise. That 10% of folks, of your middle performers, your B players, whatever you want to call them, are coming in every day and saying, you know what, yeah, I'm pushing it, I am giving everything I have to give, this is it, and this is as good as it gets. 10% of our middle performers fall into that territory. Amazingly, the other 90% are basically choosing not to be high performers. They have way more potential than they're presently using. They're just not tapping into that potential. And there are a couple of significant reasons why they're not giving it. They're not getting to that next level, even though they have the natural ability. One reason is that they don't know exactly what it takes to become a high performer. Now, I know it's sort of a crazy notion, right? Well, it should be perfectly clear what it takes to become a high performer. How could you not know? Except that when you look objectively at your high performers, take a step back and start to ask yourself the question, what does it really mean to be a high performer? Have I clearly outlined what the criteria are? Now, if you're in something like sales, for example, okay, usually it's clearer there because you say, well, the people who sell, $1 million a year versus who sell $800,000 a year, those are the high performers. Okay, that's usually pretty clear. But most jobs aren't quite so clear. Think about an engineer, think about a nurse, think about a pharmacist, think about a programmer, think about a housekeeper. Where is the line? What are the exact criteria for being a high performer? Now, take a look at it from your middle performers' perspective. What are the criteria? When they look at your high performers, if they don't have a list in front of them that says, here is exactly what the criteria are for delineating between a middle performer and a high performer, how are they supposed to figure this out? Well, they look at your high performers and they say, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that makes them a high performer? And here's what they see. Basically, their BlackBerry is surgically implanted on their body. It buzzes constantly. They get emails from these people at like midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. And it's not because there's a time difference. It's because they're up when other people are sleeping. They seem stressed out. They seem frazzled. Looks like they have pretty much an IV drip of caffeine going into their system, and they seem pretty worn out. When middle performers look at your high performers, what they see is a person who is stressed, overworked, and has a pretty awful job. Think about this. Let's imagine it's Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. You've just gotten this big major assignment. This big project has to get done. It's due Monday morning. You're going to need somebody to come in over the weekend, maybe even pull an all-nighter to bang this thing out with you, and it's going to be hard slogging work. But this thing absolutely has to get done. Your career's on the line and others' careers are on the line. Now, who are you going to turn to? It's 4 p.m. on a Friday. Who are you going to turn to? Your high performer or your middle or low performer? Of course, the high performer. When it happens again next week, who are you going to turn to? High or low? Of course, you're going to turn to your high performer. When it happens the week after that, who do you turn to? Of course, you turn to your high performer. Who has the worst job in your department, in your organization? The high performer. And this is the problem. People wonder, why did our high performers quit? They quit in part because they've got the worst job in the organization, because they're the ones we turn to over and over and over again, and we abuse them. We burn them out, oftentimes on work that didn't actually require the full talent spectrum of a true high performer. But we burn them out, we push them, we kill them off, and the issue becomes, while we're killing off our high performers, we've got a whole crew of people, untapped, sitting there saying, yeah, two things. One, that job, the job that that person has, the high performer, that stinks. That is a truly, truly awful job. And second, clearly the boss doesn't think that I'm capable of doing it, because if they did, they would have asked me. There have been about 15 experiments done on this in work settings, school settings, and time again, what these studies have found is that managers who tell, quote-unquote, B players, average performers, middle performers, when the manager comes in and says to that person, you know what, I believe that you have potential that you haven't even begun to tap yet, that you are, in fact, a high performer, you're just waiting for the right opportunity. When the manager conveys that to the middle performer, it says, you may think you're a middle performer, I don't think you're a middle performer, I think you're something better. In every single study, performance of the employee has increased anywhere from 30 to 150%. What that means is you have this untapped workforce, and the thing that prevents us from using them is two things. Number one, we're kind of lazy because we've got it in their groove with this high performer, and so we've got this established pattern, and let's be honest about it. They're easy to go to. They're all high performers, right? It's like if you had a choice between a Navy SEAL and somebody else, you're going to take the Navy SEAL. So, okay, one, we've got ourselves in this groove, but second thing is this idea that somehow middle performers are middle performers because they're tapped out, because they've maxed out their potential. And I'm here to tell you, that's 10% of the cases you face. The other 90% have more potential than they're presently using. And if you start to give them the opportunity to use that potential, they are going to shock the heck out of you, because you're going to find that of your 90% of those middle performers, some portion of them, maybe as many as half of them, are going to say, yeah, you know what, I want to take that next step. Now, of course, final note here is it would be very, very helpful if in trying to get your middle performers to become high performers, you stopped killing off the high performers and made that job so unappealing. A lot of middle performers are looking at the high performers and saying, you got to be out of your mind. Why would I want that job? Why would I want the job? It doesn't look like we're paying them anymore. We're not really differentiating them in our performance appraisals or whatever. So they're not making a whole lot more money. Their quality of life seems truly awful. And yeah, you know what? I got things to do on my weekends. I don't really want to be pulling an all-nighter every single weekend because to do these last-minute projects. So if you can start to spread the load a little bit, it's a great irony here. You spread your load and give some of that high performer work to your middle performers. Middle performers feel valued. They start to believe you think they have the potential. They start to elevate their game. They start to become high performers. And guess what? By shifting the load, you make the high performer job not quite as bad. So, this is the great irony of all of this. You've got many more high performers than you think you do sitting in your workforce. Now it's up to you to go out and start to tap that potential. Thank you.